The flagpole snapped in half like a strike of thunder. Frank felt the echo in his chest, metal crunching, then a thud as the 30-star banner hit the gravel with a distant flump. He stared, frozen, as the red, white, and blue collapsed into disgraced folds on the ground. The wind died. Even the birds fell eerily silent. It was 6:03 a.m., 6 minutes before the ceremony, 6 minutes until everything shattered. Drenched in last night's drizzle, Frank's hands trembled. He stepped forward, boots crunching gravel, and knelt. Rainwater soaked the flag's hem. The stripes were muddied, stained, and twisted around the pole that now lay snapped. Someone had carved words into the wood with deliberate cruelty. U.S. Killers, etched jaggedly beneath the barrel of a rifle. Frank's breath hitched. The plaque at the base of the pole, dedicated to the soldiers of Riverbend who never returned from Vietnam, had been vandalized too. He knelt, traced the gouged letters with a thumb. Murderers. How could someone do this? His mind raced. He pictured James McMillan, leaning on that plaque every year, head bowed in his battered army cap. Jim who carried so much inside, yet showed so little. Jim who was gone. Frank wiped his face on his sleeve and stood. He took one step toward the crowd gathering across the lawn. A group of 5 men in wheelchairs, canes, and old uniforms craned their necks, confused. A few wives and children, dressed in early morning gray, stared with shock. Frank raised his phone. He dialed. "Sergeant Mitchell," he said, voice wobbly. The voicemail took it. No answer. 3 rings and the line cut. He hung up, tore off his hat, pressed it to his chest, and made his way toward the flagpole. Someone from the crowd yelled, "It's vandalism!" Another shouted, "They took his flag!" Frank heard footsteps, fast, stumbling. A young voice, probably reporter, breathless. "Sir, do you know who did this?" He didn't answer. He knelt again and brushed his fingers over fibers. That flag had lived through 20 years of storms, snow, and ceremonies. It had been replaced, once after a tear. But it had always come back up. Frank glanced at the gleaming new brass bing of medals pinned to his chest. He felt nothing, only a wave of shame. The medals felt heavy, but so hollow. A child, no more than 9, approached. Him with a daisy. She slid it into the flagpole base's wreath hole, bloom gray with drizzle. She asked softly, "Is Grandpa here?" Frank looked up, met her tearful eyes. He swallowed hard. He's with us, honey," he whispered, voice cracking. She nodded, small, and stepped back into the arms of her mother. He exhaled, a long, shuddering breath, as if he'd been holding the world in. "He's not here." He stood, wiping grit off his knees. The crowd parted as he rose. Above them, the sky threatened more rain. Thunder growled low in the distance. Vandalism was one thing, but removing the flag, defacing a memorial, this wasn't random. It was targeted. Frank took 5 measured steps to the fallen pole, crouched, and stared at the carved letters. U.S. Killers. That was worse. That was an accusation. He lifted the pole, breaking gravelly stones loose, and tried to raise it. Too heavy. He set it back down. Police sirens wailed, distant. It hadn't been Frank's instinct to call them first. Ceremony. But the crack in his voice speaking to that child, the feeling in his gut. He'd call after. Jim never would have called. He'd have said they didn't care about him. Patch him up with legal papers later. Frank closed his eyes, inhaled rain-soaked air. Shakily, he dialed again. "Officer Ramirez?" Yes, the flagpole at Vets Memorial Park. Someone vandalized it. It's my friend, he's gone. I think it might be connected." Bit his lip. "Can you come now?" A pause. Frank looked toward the line of police cruisers rounding the park entrance, his boots pressed into puddles. "Sir?" Officer Ramirez's voice, all business. "We're on the way." Frank ended the call. A soldier's refusal to show weakness still pulsed inside him. He turned back, fists clenching. The ceremony was supposed to begin in minutes. But the flag wasn't standing. His friend wasn't. There. The emblems of memory were broken. He stepped to the plaque, gingerly cleaned mud from the veterans' names, names that pulled at something raw in Frank. Each one a life. Each one a story. His head spun with fragments. Jim slumped in a barracks, bleeding, but alive. A wounded Vietnamese girl in a photograph he'd buried in his wallet. Silence, screams, distant helicopters. His wife crying beside a cardboard box labeled Macmillan. The flag fell to his feet, and he realized he could no longer stand still. Frank grabbed his cane, tapped it at the base of the monument. "I'm coming," the tapping said. "I won't leave you again." He gritted his teeth. The sirens drew closer. Water, slicking the asphalt. The crowd murmured, held back by caution tape now strung between stanchions. Frank looked at the broken pole again. "They think they know what we did. They think they have the right," he thought. "But they don't know the bone-deep cost, the confessions we never gave." His lungs tightened. He shook, not from cold, but from anger, guilt, and fear. And then he felt the absence. Jim was not here to stand with him. Jim was nowhere visible. The sirens arrived. 2 cruisers. Lights strobed red and blue. Ray and Ramirez jumped out. Frank caught their eyes. He pointed. "Here. This is where I found his hat earlier." Ray bent, picked up a muddy army hat with a frayed brim. He looked at Frank. "Did he disappear, sir?" Frank swallowed, closed his eyes. "Yeah," he admitted. He was here earlier, showed up at dawn. Something broke him." Ramirez flicked on a flashlight and shone it into the empty lawn, muddy depressions in the grass. "Any sign of him leaving?" she asked. Frank shook his head. "He couldn't leave on his own. Not like that." Ray tucked the hat inside an evidence bag. His voice was flat, procedural. "We'll file a missing persons. But vandalism's not high priority. Unless there's evidence of foul play." Frank hovered. Ramirez stepped forward. "Sir, you did well calling us. We'll be thorough." He managed a nod and took the police tape in his hands, threading it across the path. He surveyed them. Police, veterans, spouses, reporters. His gaze landed on that child, the daisy still in the wreath socket, petals drenched but intact. The dam broke in him. He took one step back, head down. His voice caught. The crowd hushed. I need to prepare," he whispered. We always did it together. His voice cracked. "He can't be gone." Frank walked away from the flagpole, each step shuddering, cane tapping out a slow, uneven rhythm. People parted. None tried to stop him. He walked into the damp curtain of trees lining the park. The hush closed around him. Muddy grass swallowed his boots. And in that silence, the world of ceremonies, medals, and mournful speeches dissolved. It was just him and a broken legacy. "Frank, you remember Quang Tri?" The voice came from behind him, slow and cracked. Frank turned. It was Wally, oldest of the River Bend vets, wrapped in a poncho and gripping a thermos like it held absolution. His good eye studied Frank. The other had been glass for 35 years. "Quang Tri," Frank muttered. "You mean the girl, or the fire?" Wally nodded, sat beside him on the damp park bench. "Both, mostly the screaming." They sat in silence. Then Wally leaned forward. "You think this was about that? The memorial? The flag?" Frank wiped his mouth. "I think Jim thought it was." Wally's jaw tightened. "He ever tell you what really happened after you got evac'd?" Frank didn't speak. "Because he told me." Wally tapped the thermos. One night, 1989. He was drunk off his ass, and we were in his shed. He looked at me and said, "They made us ghosts before we died." Then he told me about the girl. Frank, clench the bench. Don't. He carried her for 2 miles, said she was maybe 6, legs blown apart, barely breathing. He kept whispering to her in English, nonsense words. Trying to keep her awake, Frank stood angry now. I said don't. Wally didn't flinch. Then he got back to the perimeter. The CO looked at her, said, "Too far gone." Ordered her tagged and left. Wally's voice cracked. Jim didn't fight. Just laid her down. Watched her bleed out. Frank turned away. You saw that fire in his eyes, Wally continued. For decades, the man never left that jungle. Not really. Frank looked toward the empty flagpole. I did. Worse, he whispered. Wally was quiet. What? I did worse than him. Later that afternoon, Frank sat in Jim's house, sorting through cluttered drawers. The door creaked open behind him. You break in? Frank turned. It was Diane, Jim's daughter-in-law. Her eyes were swollen. He gave me a key. Before, she nodded, biting her lip. Derek hasn't come by. He says he doesn't want to. Says your little veteran circle jerk is what ruined everything. Frank winced. Did Jim ever tell him anything? Diane snorted. About the war? Only that he made it home, and that most of him stayed behind. She stepped closer. He was afraid of Derek. Not afraid for. Afraid of. Frank frowned. Why? She reached into a box and pulled out a sheet of paper. She handed it to him. It was a printed article, online blog. Title, The Myth of Heroism, How Small-Town Veterans Rewrite War Crimes. Author, D.K. Frank stared at it. D.K. Derek Carlson, she said. He started writing those 2 years ago. Jim read, everyone. Frank swallowed hard. Did he know? She nodded. He knew Derek had found the journal. The one with the sketches. Frank went cold. The sketches of the kids? She said nothing, just nodded, slowly. Back at the memorial that night, Frank lit a cigarette with shaking hands. He heard footsteps, gravel crunching, slow, purposeful. Don't. Turn around, said a low voice. Male, familiar. I know that voice, Frank said. You should. I'm your ghost. Frank turned. It was Derek, hair shaggy, face pale, wearing a hoodie with the words, No More Heroes. Frank stared. You wrote those articles. Derek didn't deny it. Truth needed oxygen. You called your father a murderer. I didn't use names. Frank stepped forward. You think you're better than him? I think I'm honest. No, you're cruel. You know what he carried. Derek's eyes flashed. He left that girl to die. So did I. Silence. Derek's voice cracked. He could have told me. And you would have done what? Forgiven? No. But I wouldn't have turned him into a myth. Frank stared at him. I didn't mean for him to disappear, Derek muttered. I just wanted him to speak. You spoke for him, Frank said, and now he's silent forever. The cigarette burned to the filter. Frank dropped it. He's dead? Derek asked. I don't know, Frank said. But he's gone. Derek stared at the vandalized memorial, then whispered, I didn't touch the flag. Frank didn't answer. The rain started again, soft. Derek said, There are more journals. His, yours. I read them. Frank's breath caught. You want truth? He said. Then you'll get it. But don't cry when it burns. Frank, you might want to see this. Diane stood in the doorway holding a shoebox, the old cardboard sagging from age. Her voice was hushed, like the room itself had secrets. Frank took it with slow hands as if something inside might explode. He peeled off the lid. Inside, cassette tapes, rubber-banded letters, a flash drive in a plastic sandwich bag. On the drive, one word written in faded Sharpie. Record. He looked up. "Where did you find this?" "In the attic. Buried under Christmas decorations. It was wrapped in army ponchos." Frank exhaled, then set it on the table. "Let's play it." Diane hesitated. "There's more." She slid over a second envelope, heavy and crumpled. Frank pulled out 3 Polaroids. One showed Jim, 20 years old, squinting in the Vietnamese. Son, M16 slung low, a cigarette clamped between yellowed teeth. The second was worse. Jim kneeling beside a thatched hut, holding a Vietnamese boy. The child's body was limp, eyes wide open, flies on the lips. The third was empty sky and smoke, scrawled in pen across the corner. Operation Phoenix, 1969. Frank dropped them, fingers shaking. Diane sat beside him. "What was Phoenix?" Frank closed his eyes. "We weren't supposed to talk about it, ever." She waited. "It was an assassination program, kill lists, no uniforms, no rules. You were part of that?" "We all were." Later that night, Frank sat alone in his garage, laptop glowing against the shadows. He inserted the flash drive. A folder opened. JM Archive. Inside, videos. Dozens. Dated 2004 through 2024. He clicked one, hands sweating. Jim's face appeared. Older. Gaunt, eyes hollow. "If you're seeing this, I'm probably dead. Or gone." "Which is the same." Frank leaned forward, heart hammering. "They never told us what we were killing, just that it needed to die. Men, women, kids. We shot them in silence, buried them in holes, and smiled for the generals." Pause. "But I never forgot her, the girl. She screamed for 10 seconds, then nothing." Jim swallowed on camera. His voice cracked. "I told my son I was a mechanic. That's the only thing I ever fixed, my own lies." Frank paused the video. His breath trembled. Another file blinked. Frank talk, MP4. He clicked. Jim again. This time, tears in his eyes. "Frank, you told me never to speak of it. Said it'd kill us both. But it already did. You remember what you ordered that day? You said, torch it all. No witnesses." Frank jolted upright. "You gave the order, Frank, not me. I just followed it." Silence. Frank sat frozen, hands gripping the edge of the desk. Then, bang! A loud crack shattered the stillness. Glass from the garage window burst inward. Frank ducked. Another shot, closer. He crawled across the floor, heart pounding, pulling himself to the wall. A third shot hit the toolbox. Metal screamed. He waited. Silence. Then footsteps outside. Slow, measured. Frank reached for the old revolver taped under the desk. Hands trembling. He waited. A voice. Distorted. Male outside the garage door. "You were warned, old man." Then, silence. Frank's breathing came ragged, his knuckles white. The threat was real now. An hour later, police lights strobed outside. Ramirez paced the yard. "Could have been kids," she said. "But I doubt it." Frank didn't answer. "You?" "Said someone left a message?" He nodded. "Didn't see a face, just heard the voice. They knew." "Knew what?" Frank stared at her, then said slowly, "Operation Phoenix." Ramirez frowned. "The CIA thing?" "More than that. Files, testimonies, maybe blackmail." "You think this is related to McMillan's disappearance?" Frank nodded. He started to remember, and that memory got him killed. Ramirez scribbled notes. "You have any enemies?" Frank gave a dry chuckle. "Only history." "Frank, you're not safe here." Diane's voice was firm as she shut the curtains tight, locking the front door behind her. Rain hammered the roof in bursts. Lightning lit up her face. Pale, tight-lipped, determined. They shot through your garage. They vandalized the memorial. And your friend is missing. This isn't a prank. Frank sat heavily on the couch, rubbing his temples. I know who it is. Then say it. He looked up at her. It's someone from our past, or someone who knows our past. She sat down across from him. You think it's Derek? He hesitated. He's angry. And smart. But not that. Kind of angry. You sure? No. Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Then Diane leaned forward. There's one more thing. Frank blinked. What? She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This was in our mailbox this morning. He opened it slowly. Inside, a photo. Jim. Dead. Face half submerged in water. Eyes open. Frank's breath caught. On the back. One down, one to go. Diane gasped. Oh my God! Frank gripped. The photo. They killed him. They drowned him. No. No, that can't be real. It's real, Frank said. That pond. That's Clear Rock Lake. Jesus, Frank. I need to find Derek. 2 hours later, a dingy apartment complex near the edge of town. Frank pounded the door. No answer. He pounded again. Derek! Open the damn door! The lock clicked. Derek cracked it open. Hoodie pulled low. What? Your father's dead. Silence. Frank shoved the photo forward. They sent me this. They're coming for me next. Derek stared. Didn't blink. I didn't do this, he said flatly. But you started it. You think this is about a blog? Derek's voice broke. You think a few posts online brought this on? You think this is my fault? You exposed everything! I exposed you, Derek snapped. You and your generation who wrapped slaughter in flags. Frank shoved him against the doorframe. You think you're a hero? You think truth forgives? Betrayal? I think your silence killed him long before that lake did. Frank's fists shook. Then he let go. Derek adjusted his hoodie, breathing hard. There's something I didn't tell you. Frank narrowed his eyes. I got an email 2 days ago. Anonymous. No address. Just coordinates. Coordinates to what? To the old bunker, where he kept the tapes. Frank's face went pale. You mean the shelter out by Rockford Road? Derek nodded. I went. It was locked. But someone had been there. Fresh footprints, burned boxes. Jesus. There's a list, Derek said. Names, from Operation Phoenix. It was half burned, but your name was on it. Jim's too. Frank swallowed hard. That list wasn't supposed to exist. Well, it does, Derek said. And whoever has it, they're erasing history. Later, back at Frank's house. Phone rings, unknown number. Frank answers. The voice is distorted. You're next, Staff Sergeant. Frank's spine stiffens. I know who you are. You don't know shit, the voice hisses. But you will. Then, static. Call ends. Frank stares into the silence. Diane walks in. Who was it? He looks at her, voice hoarse. Someone who used to wear a uniform. I know who's doing this. Frank's voice barely rose above the hum of the old heater in Derek's car. They were parked near the edge of Clear Rock Lake, where Jim's body had been found 3 nights ago. Derek looked sideways. You're guessing? No, Frank said. I remember the voice, the cadence, the threats. It's Reese. Derek frowned. Who's Reese? Frank lit a cigarette with trembling hands. He was with us in Vietnam. Black Ops. 2 tours. He ran the lists in Operation Phoenix. The actual lists. Executions. Tortures. Ghost work. We thought he died in 71. Turns out, he just vanished. Derek stared at him. Why now? Frank exhaled smoke slowly. Because Jim finally talked. The videos, the archive. We were all supposed to die with that secret. And Reese, he's making sure of it. You really believe he's alive? I believe someone's trying to finish what we started. They reached the bunker by dusk. Old army shelter buried under an overgrown field, camouflaged beneath moss and rust. Derek unscrewed the lock with shaking hands. The hinges groaned open. Inside, darkness. They clicked on flashlights, metal shelves, moldy files, burnt paper, a cot, gas mask. Jesus, Derek whispered. He lived here? No, Frank muttered. He hid here, in the corner, a wall safe, scratched, dented. Frank knelt beside it. Entered the code, 1971, click. Inside, more tapes, photos, a revolver, one bullet, a letter sat on top. To whoever finds this, I couldn't carry it anymore. She screamed. I froze. Frank ordered the fire. I obeyed. That's not an excuse. That's the truth. Jim Derek swallowed hard. He wrote this for me. Frank shook his head. No, he wrote it for both of us. Suddenly, footsteps outside. Frank flicked his light off, motioned to stay down. Crunch, crunch, heavy boots. One person, then metal on metal. The bunker door slammed shut. They were trapped. Derek gasped. Is it Reese? Frank pulled the revolver. If it is, we don't run. From a small vent above, a voice echoed in. You should have died in Vietnam, Frank. Frank froze. That's you, isn't it? Reese. Call me whatever you like. You buried me once. But I remember, Frank yelled. You think this will erase it? No. This will balance it, Derek screamed. Why kill Jim? He was the only one honest enough to confess, Reese said. That makes him dangerous, Frank yelled back. You were worse than all of us. I was all of you, Reese snapped. I was your shadow. Silence. Then a hissing sound. Gas. Derek coughed. He's flooding it. We gotta go. Frank ran to the side wall, kicked a vent panel. I'll boost you. Go. I'm not leaving. You, Frank growled. Now. Derek climbed through. Barely fit. Frank handed him the tape box. Get that to the press. It's the only thing left worth saving. What about you? I'm already dead. Minutes later, Derek lay in the field, coughing, crying. Behind him, the bunker burned. No sign of Reese. No sign of Frank. Only ashes. Only silence. Derek stood in front of the memorial, eyes swollen, hands wrapped in gauze. Around him, silence. No speeches, no flags, no veterans. Just names. He clutched the last tape Frank had given him, now copied and uploaded to 3 separate newsrooms, 2 servers, and 1 personal drive labeled simply Truth. The press had started digging. One outlet ran the headline, Declassified, the Phoenix Files, American Atrocities Buried in Small-Town Valor. The town of Riverbend was in uproar. Protests, apologies, a shattered parade. Jim's funeral was private. Closed casket, no uniform. Frank was never found. Derek sat at the foot of the memorial. Then footsteps. He looked up. It was Ramirez. She sat beside him, handed him a manila envelope. We found this 2 days ago, P.O. Box registered. Under the name Charles Reese. Derek opened it. Inside, a photograph. Frank, alive, sitting in a truck, head down, eyes shut, and a note. He lived, but not for himself. Derek blinked. What the hell? Ramirez pulled out her phone, played a voice memo, Frank's voice. If you're hearing this, it means I lied. I let Jim take the fall. I let Reese chase ghosts, but I kept the real secret buried. Derek stared at the phone. The girl in the village, she didn't die. I hid her, got her to a priest in Da Nang. She lived. Her name was Lynn. Ramirez looked over. There's more. She came to the States in '92, changed her name, became a teacher, and then a mother. Derek's eyes widened. Ramirez whispered, "Diane, I knew. All these years, I knew. That's why I never told Jim, why I let Reese chase shadows. The truth was always sitting at our dinner table." Silence. Derek dropped the phone. "Holy shit," Ramirez said softly. "Your mother is the girl?" He nodded, stunned. "My grandfather saved her, then buried it all. So Jim would carry the guilt instead of him." Ramirez whispered, "Jesus." Derek exhaled, and in that moment, everything changed. Jim wasn't the coward. Reese wasn't the mastermind. Frank wasn't the hero. They were all the same man, split into pieces. He stood, eyes locked on the memorial, and for the first time, he whispered, "I forgive you."